We are thrilled to host Sean Gerrity, who is the president of the American Prairie Reserve and a National Geographic explorer. And the aim of the American Prairie Reserve is to return to the golden era of large-scale conservation in the United States. They aim to create a wildlife preserve in the prairies of Montana, 4 times bigger than Yosemite, in a size that will eventually rival that of the Serengeti in Africa. And so in order to accomplish that, there's the land deals, there's the acquisitions, the plans within the park, but as Sean will say in his speech today, the questions and the issues that it raises are far wider, looking at migration patterns with birds, with animals, and it's really a program of nationwide importance. And so he will go through and talk about what the foundation is up to and show some of the latest work and some images from the reserve. And we'll have time for some questions at the end. So please join me in welcoming Sean to Google. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, very much. I appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time to come. I know what a day at Google must be like. Really busy. So I appreciate you coming out. And I think what I'll do is to get everybody kind of on the same page, just start with a very short video, just of a few minutes, that was developed by National Geographic. I'll then go into more detail about the project, and then, as Cliff said, we'll take some questions for you. Okay? All right.
The American Prairie Reserve is the largest scale conservation project underway now in North America, one of the biggest in the world.
The American Prairie Reserve project is preserving one of the fastest disappearing pieces of the American West.
I think one of the things I'm most excited about is it's not too late.
When Lewis and Clark came through here a couple hundred years ago, about the time they got to the Montana border is where they saw the wildlife really begin to increase in abundance. Modern day conservation biology has said we've got to create vast reserves. We want to bring back all the wildlife in some of these areas. And that's why when we created the plans for the American Prairie Reserve, we decided to go large.
Our ultimate dream is to have 3 to 3.5 million acre fully functioning ecosystem where all the animals that were there 100 years ago, 150 years ago, have an opportunity to interact with each other again and have a major role and impact on the landscape.
We're beginning to put things back onto that landscape. We're really excited to think about the day when it's all back in balance the way it was for thousands and thousands of years.
We have reintroduced bison and currently have about 250 bison. Clearly, we'll have the capacity to have the largest bison herd in the country.
This is about the land and the wildlife, but it's also about people. We're very interested in making this area accessible to the public.
It has a lot of potential for its scenic value, for its birding.
There is a lot of promise for local communities. There's a tourism aspect, just like you'd find in Africa, other parts of North America, South America, when you build a reserve of this scale.
If somebody had said, would you have liked to have been a founder or a co-founder of Yellowstone Park, how could you not want to be on that team? It's an opportunity to be involved in creating something where you can see the tangible results of your efforts in your lifetime and have an altruistic sense of accomplishment.
The American Prairie Reserve is critical to the existence of future generations. It feeds everything that is to be human.
This is the time to seize it and secure it forever so it can be enjoyed for hundreds and hundreds of years. Okay, so as you may have read in my background, I grew up in Montana. I work there now, but I spent about 20 years in this valley working in for-profit. I started a company back in 1984. It's still going 33 years later. We had an idea at the time that seems to have stuck pretty well. And I learned a lot working here for 20 years. I know what the valley is like. I know the pace. I know what it takes to be successful here. Our business at the time, I don't know how much it's changed, but at the time, people in the valley were struggling and going as fast as they could to hire the smartest people they could beg, borrow, or steal to assemble their companies. And it was kind of like hiring studio musicians who were exceedingly good as individuals, but you put them all together, and it was really difficult sometimes to create a band and get those albums out the door on a quarterly basis before you missed the window. We had an idea on how we could get teams up and running, focused on a common vision, faster than they would normally otherwise do, particularly the special individuals that were coming to the valley at the time. I did that for about 20 years. It sent me all over the world, working with lots of different industries, not just high tech. I was based here. We built our company up to about 40 people, and again, it's still going. So now what I've done is parlay the skills and the ideas I got working with so many different kinds of folks and so many different kinds of industries to something I really care about, which also takes aligning a lot of people onto a common vision over a very long period of time, not just for 6 or 9 months. So let me tell you a bit more about the project and the movie went into and what we're up to. As it said there, we're working on a very, very large scale, I'll tell you about that, to put back everything that used to be there. Not just little museum pieces, but all the wildlife, including the top trophic predators. Quite an ambitious effort. Some people said this era is long gone, that you're not able to do this kind of thing anymore. We haven't done anything for the last 60 years like it. We think it can be, and we're making some really good progress. So when we talk about big, how big are we going? It's a lot of square miles. Comes up to over 3 million acres, the size of this thing when it's done. About the size of the state of Connecticut, if everybody's moved from back east. But maybe the best image is the idea of the Serengeti, from a sheer square mile standpoint, and also the numbers and variety of wildlife on the landscape. Since we're in California, if you were to take a picture of the eventual reserve, the size of it, if you put one edge on the Golden Gate, the other edge would go far into Sierra Nevada. Imagine one very lonely paved road bisecting it, the rest of it, all wildlife, no towns, just animals. Scientists tell us there are only 4 places left on Earth to do a project of this scale on the grasslands. Only 4 places left, and as we sit here today, they're all shrinking. They're being plowed up at the edges to grow food for our growing species. We're working up there in the northern Great Plains. And for a lot of reasons, we think one of the best spots, if not the best spot in the world to do this kind of project of this size. So if you zoom into the northern Great Plains, you'll see that it touches about 5 states and 2 provinces of Canada. And that little blue spot is the best spot for a variety of reasons, and it just happens to be up in northeastern Montana is where it is. So a couple of reasons why it's the best. Of all that big green splotch there, it has not yet been farmed. It hasn't been plowed up. That's really key to do something at this scale. A second reason is there's a wildlife history that existed there I'll tell you about that didn't exist anywhere else in the Great Plains to this extent. You don't have to buy it all. You only have to buy a small amount and use that as glue to pull together existing public lands to make the whole model work. And very unusual, unlike the place where we're sitting here, people are moving out from rural areas to the cities, and that's actually been going on since about World War I. That steady decline of population gives us a lot of opportunity to buy and assemble a great deal of land. Now, when you go over that green area of the Great Plains, most of it looks like this. It's very fragmented, fenced, under cultivation, growing food for us, as I said. But there's one special, very spectacular spot in that place where I've been showing you, where it's not yet turned over, a blank canvas, if you will. If we can assemble it in time to put this whole thing back together, we believe we can do it and we can save it forever. The stories of wildlife have been passed down actually for thousands of years. People have been living out in this area, this landscape, since about 11,000 years ago, when the last ice age receded. The stories of the wildlife passed down through modern day Native Americans who have been there recently, in the last 600 or 700 years. Crows, Grovants, Assiniboines, Flatheads, Penderoils. And people then started writing it down, actually the stories, with fur trappers from Hudson Bay Company in the late 1700s. Of course, Lewis and Clark in the early 1800s told stories of being out here and what an incredibly beautiful place it was, but also the wildlife experience that was like nowhere else in North America. People came also from Europe later on as these stories spread around the world. People like Karl Bodmer, who came from Germany and did 50 images in this area. And they said at the time, in the 1830s, the Americans ought to save this before it's all gone. It's extraordinary. We didn't save it, quite the opposite, with Manifest Destiny. People came out, brought livestock, put up fences, and the wildlife went away. And I mean entirely went away. In that Connecticut Serengeti-sized place I'm talking about, every single bison, cougar, grizzly bear, wolf, and more were completely eradicated, not one left in that area. That's a tough start for a project like this. But while that was happening, you'll probably remember in the 1870s, another idea was waxing. And that was, some people call it America's best idea, and that's of our national parks. It was a golden era. It lasted till about 1950 when we did our last one, Grand Teton. But during that amount of time, we did Yosemite, we did Glacier, the Grand Canyon, the Everglades. It was incredible what happened. But we stopped, and we haven't done one for 60 years. And ironically, we missed the grasslands during that golden age. And the grasslands, because of their low elevation and incredible forage, they have a carrying capacity for wildlife, a biological carrying capacity for wildlife that exceeds all these other parks combined. So our idea is to restart that era, and right up there in that dot I showed you, build the biggest one that's ever been done with an innovative public-private partnership this time around, 1 million acres bigger than Yellowstone, and put all that wildlife back and save it forever. I was in business here for 20 years. I know what you guys have to deal with each day. Focus, setting goals, staying focused, watching the scope creep. I know that. So we have 3 areas, and we always break things into 3, as you know. One is about assembling the landscape. I'll tell you more about that. The next is when you have the landscape together, converting it or remodeling it from livestock value to biodiversity value. And lastly, how do we make sure human beings, the people who live in the area and folks who are beginning to visit from around the world, how do they begin to enjoy it and interact with it now, not waiting till we're completely done? So going through these 3 just quickly, understanding the landscape ownership is key to understanding the model and why we can move so fast and so affordably. That oval, there's that Connecticut Serengeti-sized piece of property there. It's big. The white piece up there, the white pieces are private land, and our model has us buying 500,000 acres of private bits and gluing together all the other colors, which are different kinds of public lands, Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife Service, etc. The idea is to put it all together and eventually create a seamlessly managed reserve after you've taken down, frankly, thousands of miles of barbed wire fence. The blue pieces here show you our progress to date. We started from scratch, not knowing how to raise money. We've raised nearly $80 million so far. We spend it really quickly on land. This shows you about 16 to 17 property acquisitions to date. Our property acquisitions tend to be big. They're about the size of Palo Alto. Some are about the size of Santa Clara County. That's the size of the ranches we're putting together. Not easy, they're very complex. Eventually, we have 310,000 acres right now. We're adding about 30,000 acres a year to our model. When it's finished, the reserve will look something like that. You can pull those boundaries either way you like, but that's the square kilometers or square miles. Of course, it won't be that exact shape, but that's the idea. Seamlessly managed reserve. If you're an individual or a herd of elk, you can walk across that and you won't know who owns what because the fences are down, as are the keep out signs that are existing today. People ask us, how can in this day and age, can we build something this big? It must be incredibly expensive to do this. It used to be done by government fiat. So we say, well, take a look at some of the things we're building today at universities, hospitals, museums. Next year, we're going to start 3 new NFL football stadiums. They come in at a little over $1 billion a piece. This project, the biggest reserve ever done in this country, all the endowment, all the management costs, and all the land purchase costs are going to come in at just a little bit over half the price of 1 new football stadium. We think it's very affordable, very doable. The second piece here is the idea of biodiversity restoration, and this is where some of the things I learned in Silicon Valley come into play, is how do you look at something that's that big, just extraordinarily big, and get a handle on what you just bought and how you're going to do the remodeling project. You need to go out and understand what it's like in all kinds of seasons and all kinds of different topography. So, in fact, using Google technology, we're using a combination of extremely low-tech with a very high-tech approach to doing this. It was daunting in the beginning. We found out about a group called Adventurers and Scientists for Conservation. Brilliant young man started the idea, and he brings what's called adventure scientists from all around the world, and they walk on our reserve. Here, you see them in the middle of the winter walking at about 25 below zero. They also walk in August at 105 above. We give them the information and teach them how to look for the things that are important to us for our restoration and management processes. They go out every day, they're out there today. They walk anywhere from 5 to 15 miles a day, 5 days a week, collecting information for us. All kinds of temperatures. Just in the first 3 years of the project, they'll have done 1 circumnavigation of the entire Earth just in this project area. This is 6 people. We switch them out as they get tired. We get new ones, fresh horses. Here's an example. Today, they're walking in what's called the Sun Prairie Unit. It's about 48 square miles, about the size of San Jose, greater San Jose area. So this morning, what they would have done is gotten together with their Google tablets. They key in their GPS units and their transects. When they go out and they start to see information, the kind of things that we have them looking for, they make information, they take videos, they take photographs, they write, etc. I live 300 miles away from the reserve in Bozeman, Montana, and I can at night then take a look at these pins, you're familiar with all this, and see what happened that day. I can see they saw some pronghorn antelope. That means they came back from Canada in the summer, and now they're back on the reserve. That's cool. See what they were doing, where they were going, all of that when they're having their babies. They might have downloaded one of 50 different camera traps spread across 50 square miles. And this may look boring, an elk eating, but it's interesting to us. It's 2:30 in the morning. It's 15 degrees below zero. And even more interesting, because we wanted this test, that fence he's standing by has 1 hot wire running 7,000 volts through it. It keeps our bison in, but it's permeable like Gore-Tex to other wildlife. And in about 5 more minutes here, he turns and jumps right through the fence and scrapes on that hot wire, and it doesn't bother him. That's what we're looking for. So these folks who are doing very low-tech stuff, very thoughtful, slow-walking people looking at things, using high-tech, they load us the information using Google technology. To us, we can make good management decisions. Another challenge, I'm sure you recognize this with the kind of projects you're doing. When you go for something this big, it's hard to do it by yourself. You need collaborators. Here's an example of some of our collaborators. But they come from their own cultures and their own world. They see things differently, speak a different language. How do you pull them all together to work on this one project? I want them to look through the same lens, at this landscape, all through the same lens, and figure out how to work together. So we had to come up with our own language. We call it the Frazee scale. Now, it's a very simple thing. Mostly, we've taken what you define as a fully functioning grassland ecosystem, break it into 10 easily discussable topic areas, and say we want to move up on the scale. We want to move into the blue, as it were. That's what success looks like, is a high score on this particular scale. So, for instance, number 8 is predators. The people who are walking out there today, just last week they saw their very first live cougar. Even cougar specialists in their entire lifetime don't get to see live cougars oftentimes. They saw one last week. So they would mark a 2. At least we have a cougar. But you don't get any higher than that because we have no wolves and no grizzly bears yet. So on big predators, you would get a low score. So our groups of collaborators go out into these Palo Alto or Mountain View-sized landscapes, walk, and work together using the same language to give the thing a baseline score. You can add this up, obviously. You've got a total of 70 possible. This particular piece of ground got a 28. It also allows them to then talk about year-by-year management plans for moving the needle, and we all look at it through the same way, and they have the same success criteria. So this is really key for us. Some of the things we're doing out there, we're doing all kinds of stuff. For instance, you saw one of those things in fire. We want to incorporate natural fire back into the landscape. We have to force it a bit. But we burn up lots and lots of prairie, like thousands of acres at a time. That rejuvenates both the soil, but it brings back the variety in the plant world. It's gotten too homogeneous out there. Once we get that variety going again, we start to see success in grassland birds coming back, not just in numbers. We want abundance, but we also want diversity. So when the diversity and the abundance go up together, now we're starting to win. We take down lots and lots of fence, so animals that can run like pronghorn, like 65 miles per hour, fastest land mammal in North America. They don't do so well when they hit fences. Lots of fences coming down, hundreds of miles, allowing pronghorn, bighorn sheep, other prairie animals like elk to move freely across the landscape again. We're importing some animals. Swift fox are coming soon. We started with bison, who were gone for 100 years. Started with 16. With babies this year, we'll be up over 600. On our way to 10,000, which will be by far the largest herd on the planet. And making room for top tropic predators. For us, that's grizzly bears, wolves, and mountain lions. Mountain lions just got back about 15 years ago after an 80-year absence. Wolves and bears are getting closer all the time. Last thing, and that's the human element, very important to us in two distinct ways. The visitors for sure, but what's really important in big-scale conservation around the world is the people who live in the periphery of something like this vision. And you have to understand the context you're working in. It could be fishermen, it could be loggers. In our case, it's cattle ranchers. More than 200 of them raising more than 500,000 head of cattle. They took a long time getting rid of all those bison, wolves, and bears. Why would they want them back? They have to figure out what's in this for us. They don't start off excited, let me tell you. So we have to figure out what can we do, if you think about it, to soften those borders around this big, huge reserve. Now this is really big. How do we figure out a way that they can be winners in this thing? We have a number of ideas. The first one out of the gate that tries to address what they want to be, which is being a cattle rancher. We started the only wildlife-friendly beef company in the US. It's called Wild Sky Beef. We're now selling thousands of pounds of beef a week. You can get in California, New York, etc. And here's the idea. We go to them and say, if you'll raise your beef to our protocols, which is this Frazee scale, the exact same thing we use to judge ourselves in the core reserve, you're on the periphery. If you'll raise your beef to these protocols, it'll be like Delta with the silver and gold and platinum levels. As you start to move up, you get 5 cents per pound live weight premium, or 6 cents, or 7 cents, depending on how far you get up that scale. Now the neat thing is now cattle ranchers who are not too excited about this are using the exact same scale. As you know in business, our motivations can be different, but we're aligned to the same desired end result. And that's beautiful. So Wild Sky is our first idea out the door with this, and it's working pretty well. We have others to try to soften those borders. And this is really key. I talked about biological carrying capacity of grasslands. Out here, there's probably a biological carrying capacity of about 600 grizzly bears. But what is the social carrying capacity? That's in the tolerance of people for all those bears. It might be about 5 right now. That might be pushing it, but we're going to get there. Most of our work is not science. It's actually sociology and psychology. How do you increase the social carrying capacity for wildlife around the world? Marine ecosystems are the thing we're building. Visitors from around the world are important to us. I've been to numerous parks in Africa, and it's often segmented based on what you can afford. We want this to be for the public. We want this to be for everybody. We've opened campgrounds, just like you'd find at the base of El Cap and Camp 4. $10 a night, people are enjoying that. We're building more. We want to make sure people are educated and walk away enlightened and excited and inspired. So there's lots of signage going up, helping people to understand species by species how things fit, even like prairie dogs in the ecological niche, why they're so keystone, why they're important. Some people want to come out and camp, but they have a different idea what camping looks like. And they want to be out and have the adventures during the day, happy to get dirty, being out in the wind, traveling with our guides. But they want to be able to say, I was in a tent, which these are, for sure. They are canvas tents, technically, but so they can go home and brag about that. But they like air conditioning and heat and really nice thread count sheets and showers and this sort of thing. This is Kestrel Camp. They get tired of ramen, so we don't give them ramen. We give them other things when they're there, and we have a very nice wine list. And, but they're out there during the day having these amazing big adventures, but then they come back and they're able to spend time with our naturalist guides, spend time with the other guests, and get ready after a good night's sleep in these tents, go at it again the next day. There are lots of other ways we're working on layering in ways to experience the prairie. Again, 20 years in Silicon Valley, I get the speed around here. Slowing people down is important. What you're seeing here is a transect I'm doing with some folks in September. We'll walk 250 miles from side to side across the reserve in 14 or 15 days. Very slow, circuitous route. Artists, writers, some journalists, naturalist guides, and others, and just have what we call a land snorkeling roving salon, basically. And yeah, it's 250 miles. Not so bad, though, when you can take time to stop and have wonderful discussions. If any of you have kayaked or boated down the Grand Canyon for 3 weeks, it's a similar kind of thing. Just cut off the outside world for a while. Kids are just fantastic to bring out here. And what I really love is when they shut off their devices. I know it's important they use their Google products. Well, it's really cute, but for a little bit, we ask them, they don't work out there anyway, so we ask them to just put down their devices, teach them about this naturalist stuff, and they just absolutely come alive. They are really inspired by what they're seeing. And we try to show them things at the micro level, nematodes in the dirt. At the medium level, there are some 2,000-pound bison walking by from a few hundred yards away. But we also try to get them to look at the big level as well, how this huge landscape and this big park that's being built for them is important, but it's connected to something even bigger. And so we tell them about these pronghorn. Again, it's very fast animals, but we tell them this is only part of their home. Because every year they actually leave not only Montana, but they leave the United States. They walk 250 miles north into Canada. That is their migration, the longest pronghorn migration in the country. They come back to Montana in the wintertime. Long-billed curlews, as Californians, you will see walking up and down the beach here in California, but only in the winter, because in the summer they're in Montana. Same bird. They come up and they nest on the American Prairie Reserve, and then they go to the Gulf. They come to California in the wintertime to rest, and they turn around and they come back and do that each year. It's a big migration. We tell the kids that we show them a Swainson's hawk, and we say, guess what? These guys are really amazing. Swainson's far bigger than a curlew. They nest as well, have their babies on American Prairie Reserve, and then this migration all the way to southern Argentina, 14,000 miles round trip. They need to have solid anchors and solid homes on both ends that are not getting plowed up, because they lose that habitat, and then we lose the Swainson's. So we're trying to help them understand the vastness of this thing that we are building for them and their grandkids, but also how it's interconnected to so many other things by these unthought of species that travel so far. We love, again, important that they use their technology products sometimes, but we love just having them get quiet and just kind of contemplate all this, and even sit and just getting used to the sounds of the reserve as well. So the chance to work on this project really, I think, is an incredible privilege for me. I think our board and our staff and our many supporters feel the same way about it. Maybe one of the most satisfying things to me is the idea of its lasting value. In a world where so many things we build are impermanent and ephemeral, this reserve, like Yosemite and Yellowstone, we know will be here hundreds and hundreds of years from today. That's pretty cool, I think. Personally, I like the idea that we might be inspiring young people with the realization that not everything big and exciting and important has been done yet. There's still a lot of room for them to contribute. I want to show them that if you can dream big and assemble a group of talented, very ambitious and caring people, you can still do incredible things. A big part of this project involves constantly testing conventional wisdom, and I learned to do that after 20 years in this valley, that's for sure. We've asked, is that golden age of large-scale conservation really over? What conditions might we be able to get in place to try to restart it again? We've also said, how might we increase the social carrying capacity for wildlife in big reserves like this around the world? What if we could make a way for all the stakeholders to be winners in the process? These questions are fun, and they have led us to a lot of breakthroughs, like the Frazee scale, like wild sky beef. I hope all of you appreciate the advantages of working in a place like Silicon Valley and an innovative environment like Google. I think you're amassing skills by the week that you could apply to a range of endeavors that could be immensely satisfying to you and incredibly meaningful to society. And I hope you'll find the time to come experience this place and that this big project. It is in fact being built for you. So please come see us sometime soon. Thank you.
What's the biggest challenge that you all face in dealing with the existing landowners and in expanding the park?
I think probably the biggest one is trying to understand how big we're going to go, and I think the main thing, as I said, how they can be winners in the process, what's in it for them. Wild Sky Beef is a good start. Just setting up and being neighbors, we have full-time employees out there, is a good start. But the biggest challenge is getting people to see how we're going to use it differently than how it's been used for the last 100 years.
So you've talked about this already throughout the talk, but I guess which Silicon Valley lessons are most important for this startup, and in what ways has it been most different from Silicon Valley?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I'd never been involved in nonprofits before. I didn't really know what the difference was. And I think the interesting thing, people are surprised by my answer, is I don't see any difference. I started a company from scratch. I worked with a lot of VCs over 20 years. I know what it's like to try to get an enterprise off the ground. Absolutely no difference whatsoever in terms of particularly how you set up your organization, set quarterly objectives, get a very clear set of visionary goals that are out about 18 months and jump to those goals and reset it again. No difference whatsoever. Same I did in biotech and the movie industry and banking, whatever else. I don't see any difference with a for-profit or nonprofit. Maybe that's a surprise. The fundraising was a major shock. I thought you just get a sales force going, get a great executive vice president of sales, and then everything's great and I don't have to think about it anymore. I can do what I got involved in this. That didn't happen. We have raised a lot of money. It's more work than I'd understood, and I didn't quite get the idea of the lack of tangible quid pro quo. When I had a product to sell here, there was an exchange of good or service. This takes a very special person to give money. We found hundreds, actually thousands of them, but the idea of just pure intrinsic value is tricky. And so that is a big challenge. I think probably the best lessons I mentioned a couple of times here is in the world of conservation, I'm not going to say nonprofits, but in the industry of conservation, the assumptions are incredibly rigid, I feel. And we come in and say, does that really have to be like that? Is there another way of doing it? How about we start a for-profit company that's owned by our nonprofit? So many people said, can you even do that legally? Absolutely you can do that legally. So American Prairie Reserve owns Wild Sky Beef. It's a for-profit company owned by a nonprofit. Lots of things like that, pushing conventional wisdom, thinking about how you can change hearts and minds with the seed of an idea and then just moving it forward in increments, not trying to bowl people over with the end result. That works here, I know. And probably the lesson here is things are not as easy as it seems. If you really knew how many hours people actually put in to start a company, most people think, well, that was easy. They just lucked out with this idea and they all got rich. It's not how it happens. I never experienced that between '84 and 2000. And I think the work ethic is really important. I do think some nonprofits, to me, just complain about the outside world not getting their mission. You know, they would give us more money, et cetera. They're not going to get it. You just have to work really, really hard for a very long period of time. Those are some of the things I think.
You mentioned using some of the Google technologies to track some of the animals and photos. I'm curious which ones you're using and how they're working for you.
We're scratching the surface, and we'd very much like more help. So the most initial ones right now are laying out the information that we are getting from the folks that are walking, or being able to track. We have satellite radio collars on some of the female bison. They're like female elephants. If you can find the key females, you can find the whole herd. And so they go wander big areas. So using understanding how to build maps, where have they been, not just last night, but over the last 3 months or so? And what are the patterns we can see by why do they keep using these particular areas? They can go wherever they want. So that's really interesting. But it's so probably pretty low level use of your technology actually, but it's a big deal for us for management decisions. Beginning to get, what I would really love help on is getting people to understand what it looks like out there. My guess is when you think prairie, you might think about cornfields in Kansas. That's not the scene that is out there. I don't know if I can go back with it. As you see that, it's not the prairie in Kansas, that's for sure. So the idea of even as simple of the backpacks that you can be carried and do Google Street View, something like that, to be able to take the story out to the world. Last year I was in Azerbaijan, I was in the United Arab Emirates, I was in London and Amsterdam. We're starting from scratch, showing up in person. That's a lot of work. If we could use Google technology and information like Street View to help people understand what we have out there and bring things to them in a new way, that would accelerate our project. So we're just beginning to think about how we might work with Google. We'd just love it.
A couple of questions.
Yes.
One is, did you look at sort of making it a public-private partnership, looking at getting some government money or not? And then if you didn't, do you think you will eventually become self-sustainable, where you won't need any additional funding at all? And the second question is, how did you come up with sort of the land area that you need? Why this much land? Why not sort of less land?
Yeah. Let me go backwards from the why 5,000 square miles. You know, where did that come from? What that came from is conservation biologists looking at grasslands in Africa, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, et cetera, taking a look at if you have a fully functioning ecosystem with enough wildlife for genetic diversity and all that, how much land might they need to kind of fold back in on themselves and for everything to work? What you need in the grasslands is bigger than most places like forests, because there's natural disasters that occur, like an icing over. In Montana, where we are, you can have maybe 400 or 500 square miles. Get snow, then melting, we call it a schnook, and then more snow, and then more melting, and the ice is so thick, except for a bison, most everything else can't pass through it. They can't feed, they'll starve to death. They need to be able to shift over, like 80 miles, that's a big shift. You know, like going from here to Sacramento to find food, because the entire Bay Area is totally iced. So you need big areas so you can have those disasters, sometimes big fires, which actually a year later rejuvenate the soil and make things better. In the meanwhile, you're very hungry. So you have to be the threat of fire and ice, which is good for the landscape, not good when you need to eat the next month. You need to be able to move about. That's why it's so big. A lot of animals, frankly, it's not because they're cantankerous, but they don't quite get along. A grizzly bear needs a lot of territory, about 100 square miles. They don't like bumping into each other, and you have conflicts when it's too tight. So wolf packs, grizzly bears, cougars don't overlap in their territory. It doesn't work. And big predators like that need a lot of protein, a lot of room, and not conflicts with other species. So grasslands are some of the biggest, about the size, about like marine ecosystems, frankly. Tell me your other question. Sorry. That's how we got to 5,000 square miles. Government money. We would love some. If you know any government people with extra money, we'll stay after. Here's how the government is contributing marvelously, frankly. I have no complaints. Fundraising is hard for sure, and we're using it to buy the private land. But the government is allowing us, very progressively I think, to use 2.5 million acres of BLM for this purpose, and we don't have to buy it. That saves about $4 or $5 billion. That's key. They're allowing us to use government public land without any kind of product like oil and gas, timber, mining or cattle ranching. They're not asking us to use it for commercial purposes. That's fantastic, and we're one of the only ones they're allowing to do that. It's just never been asked before. Hey, can we use millions and millions of acres for absolutely nothing except the public's enjoyment? So that's cool. I mean, we don't have to buy it. Now, if there's some extra cash to help us out, that would be absolutely delightful. We just haven't penetrated that game yet. Some of the bigger organizations, Nature Conservancy, World Wildlife Fund, and Wildlife Conservation Society, are good at it, but it took them 30 or 40 years to get good at it. We're a little late to that party.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about global warming, climate change, and how that's going to affect the reserve over the years, and if you're thinking about that as a problem?
We're thinking about it for sure. We're trying to work within our sphere of influence, not out in our whole sphere of concern. It certainly is happening, undeniably. We can argue for days whose fault it is, but it is happening. So for us, we look, how do we protect ourselves against the possible downsides? The main thing is to go big. Like we just talked about, that's why you go so big. If it gets warmer and drier, we need more land to support the same kind of wildlife. Actually, if it gets warmer and more humid, it's actually a plus. We don't know which way it's going to go. If you've driven from here across the United States, you'll feel dry in California, around Davis, dry in Nevada, dry in Montana, and you get it just a little bit halfway into North Dakota, and all of a sudden you hit the wall of humidity. You ever had that? Minnesota, Wisconsin, all of a sudden it gets humid. With more humidity, it's hotter too. You have lots more forage, much more carrying capacity. We don't know which direction it's going to go for us. We're right on that line. The only thing we can do is go absolutely huge. Make it bigger. Don't settle. Don't compromise just because we get tired of fundraising. That's the main thing. There are, by the way, if you go back for 11,000 years, and we didn't have the NOAA or any weather services, but we can do core samples into dry lakes, and we can see what kind of pollen existed 4,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago. The pollen, you can extrapolate what kind of plants you had around you, right? There was a period of time, a drought, a big one. It was called the altithermal. It started 8,500 years ago and went to about 5,000 years ago, a 3,500-year drought where rainfall was at about 13 inches, dropped down to about 7 inches a year for 3,500 years, and there was still wildlife out there. Then it slowly came back, very slowly, over about a period of 800 or 900 years, and came back to about the average we have today, which is 13 inches a year. But that's a heck of a drought. I'm not worried about drought or global warming. I don't mean to be cavalier, but these wildlife are unbelievably resourceful in terms of the conditions they can live in.
Follow up on that question, actually, perennial bunchgrass has a high capacity for carbon sequestration.
Yes.
So is there an opportunity as you transition these ranch systems back to traditional ecosystems to sell offsets or sort of leverage that sequestration to sort of push this project forward?
We get excited and less excited here and there, waxing and waning our enthusiasm based on the carbon markets. It's been stumbling a bit. So we're ready. The land is really big, and you're exactly right. Eventually, this will be seen, I think, as a terrific carbon sink and viable for what you're describing. In fact, the very first group from California has contacted us and finally has a model to where they can give us what we think is meaningful money on a yearly basis, about $100,000 a year. That doesn't buy much land, but that's about what we can get for now. If we nail down one piece, put a conservation easement on it, which we're doing anyway, and we're waiting for the markets to catch up with us. We're ready to go. Know any great people? Tell them to call us. We're on the hunt, but you poke around at it and it's not quite ready for prime time.
I have two questions.
Yes.
My first question is about the BLM and your agreement with them.
Mm-hmm.
Do they reserve the right to come back 10, 20 years from now and mine or pull anything they want to out of there without any consideration of your original agreement? And my second question is about predators and how you're working with the landowners that are around the borders of this area to get them to, because the predators are going to migrate too. So how are they going to welcome them into the fold?
With the Bureau of Land Management, you don't actually get a contract or an agreement, you get a lease. They tend to be 10 years. You can ask for 15 years. Where we're working, since it started in 1936, there's been no precedent for them taking things away from people or neighbors competing for neighbors' property, that kind of thing. So it's relatively relaxed and calm. There are other jurisdictions like New Mexico, Utah, and Nevada where the BLM can be a lot more contentious, but it's culturally, it's regional. And Montana is kind of a calm backwater from a BLM standpoint, thankfully. The other thing I learned in Silicon Valley, back to your original question about what are some of the important things, is when you want to get together with some collaborators, study very, very carefully where they're going, what are their values, what's important to them in 5, 10, 15 years. We've taken a look at their strategic plan and the trajectory of the BLM. They're going in the direction of more open lands for the public, a higher emphasis on biodiversity if they don't get too much pressure from industry. So we are a breath of fresh air. We are where they want to go. So we're actually moving them faster to their own strategic plan than they are. We're trusting that it's very unlikely they're going to disrupt our path because this is what they've been looking, this is the kind of collaboration they want, and you usually can't get at this kind of a scale. So we're trusting that it's going to last quite some time, and it's a race, actually, to create what I described here, to where people cherish it so much that they will go berserk if the government tries to do anything, like what happened with the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge about 8 years ago. They thought, let's just drill there to increase our reserves. The public didn't put up with it. They stopped it. Now that may get threatened again, but this is in the lower 48. People are coming to visit it. People are falling in love with it. So our goal is to make it such a rich cultural thing and so wanted and valued by the American public that it would be quite a fight to do something in the patchy areas of BLM. With the predators, we're doing a variety of things. As one is we're paying them money to not complain about predators. Two, because that's not fair, you just can't just say don't complain. We're showing them ways to deal with them that we're bringing back from various areas around the world. For instance, like in Namibia, is in the Waterberg Plateau in northern Namibia. I got to visit a rancher area very similar to this. They don't have wolves, but they have cheetahs, and cheetahs kill a lot of cattle. So do leopards. So they kill them left and right. The ranchers do. They see it as a threat. A woman named Lori Marker started an organization there, the Cheetah Conservation Fund, and she brought in predator-controlling dogs. There's Kagans, there's Anatolian bear dogs, even Great Pyrenees, and others. They all take kind of different roles. But say you take a couple of dogs about this size, like Anatolian bear dogs. They're more awake than this guy seems to be. But you give the rancher 2 little puppies, and they put them, in this case, with their goats. They don't herd. They're worthless for herding, but they think the goats are their buddies. A leopard or a cheetah comes in, they break away from the goat herd, and they'll chase that cheetah down. If they catch it, they'll tear it apart. So you put in predator-controlled dogs, and they're $1,500 a piece, so you give them $3,000 worth of these little puppies, show them how to use them, show them how to stir them in with their cattle, and you lessen the chances of coyotes or other things bothering your livestock. The other thing we need to do is make the landscape really big and give wild protein back in the landscape. There's about 3,500 elk out there right now. We're shooting for 30 to 40,000 elk. There was no bison until we brought them in. We're shooting for 10,000. With enough bison and elk to chase around, the livestock are not that interesting. Seriously, I live near Yellowstone. Very, very few cows ever get killed by wolves, and Yellowstone is completely surrounded by cattle ranching. They make a lot of noise about it, but you don't see a lot of dead calves. You do see a lot of elk dying. So lots and lots of protein in the landscape. It's a distraction thing. And make sure it's big enough that they can live on this landscape. It's going to be 1 million acres bigger than Yellowstone Park. And lots of dead things, frankly. Grizzly bears, their favorite thing, a dead bison. Nothing like a 2,000-pound dead bison sitting there to make your day if you're a grizzly bear.
Are you introducing them, or are you just waiting for them to arrive?
The latter. We can't do that, but they're getting closer. You know exactly where they are, coming off the Rocky Mountain front. With bison, wolves are coming from south from Saskatchewan and up from Yellowstone Park. They're converging on that area. This is huge, and the elk are already there. They just, the wolf rumor mill is working, and they're getting closer. And they used to be here, many, many thousands of them. Yes.
All right. Well, having said that, you can probably visit more about this on your website. And how can they find out more information?
Yes. So I have cards here if you'd like to go on our website. I write a blog on National Geographic. The best way to come and get information is come walk that 250 miles with us. That's the best way. We can talk day and night, sit around the fire with gin and tonics. Glad to do that. And truly, come and see it. Many, many people from California come up to stay at Kestrel Camp or wherever else. And you'd be surprised how many people you might know you start talking who have been there, some of them numerous times. It is quite something. It's a place you can go back to over and over again in different seasons and see something different, whether you get to see some coyotes, and the next time you come, you see the aurora borealis or the northern lights from your deck sitting on your yurt. It's because there are no lights out there. It is really quite something. So coming to visit, watching for information come through National Geographic as we do new things. We just finished a Science and Education Center, for instance. Quite a lot of activity this year. But come take information from me, and particularly, we are very interested in working with Google. It's hard to, I know what it's like working in this valley. If I sat here for 3 months, I wouldn't know Google. There are so many things happening in interesting pockets of the company. Please reach out to me, and we'll be back in a second and come to you and talk about it and see how it might work. But we would love Google's help for sure. So any ideas, we're ready to go.
All right. Well, Sean, thank you very much for speaking at Google.
Thank you very much.